What's up, YouTube? I decided to put together what I think will be a pretty interesting list. The most iconic baseball cards from each decade of baseball. So there's essentially been 16 decades of baseball. So without further ado, the first iconic card from the 1860s. To me, the most iconic card from that era is the 1869 Peck and Snyder Red Stockings Baseball Club of Cincinnati card. Peck and Snyder was basically like a really early Dick's sporting goods store. They were in New York, and this card was used to promote their sporting goods company. And at the time, the Cincinnati Red Stockings were the biggest team in the National League. They were the first baseball team. Many consider this to be the first baseball card. There are a few cabinet cards that depict people in baseball attire that some think might be considered a baseball card, but many people consider this to be the first true baseball card, and it's hands down the most iconic to me from the 1860s. And this came out just 4 years after the Civil War ended. So it's just pretty crazy to think how old this card is, and it's very iconic. Going into the 1870s, there's actually not too many cards from the 1870s. There's a ton from the 1800s, but not from the 1870s. But the most iconic card has to be the 1871 Mort Rogers scorecard of George Wright. George Wright was baseball's first superstar. He was actually the first batter in National League history. He was on the card I just showed, the Peck and Snyder card, along with his brother Harry Wright. He was also on that Peck and Snyder card. But the Wright brothers were pretty instrumental in really forming National League baseball. And George Wright was the younger brother of Harry Wright, I think by 12 years. And he was really like a superstar athlete at the time, George Wright was. And there's some other key players from this set. Albert Spalding's also in this set, and we all know who Spalding is, the Spalding baseballs and basketballs. And so many people consider this 1871 to 72 Mort Rogers scorecard to be one of the really first true baseball cards, because on the backs there's even numbering like we see today of cards numbered. There's a scorecard on the back. I believe this might have been the first scorecard. So yeah, 1871 to 72 Mort Rogers. We're not sure if it came out in 71 or 72, but it's definitely in the 1870s. Next, in the 1800s, like I said before, there's a lot of, key iconic cards in the 1800s. There's the N28 Allen and Ginter. There's the 1887 N172 Old Judge. Those are the photo cards, really neat cards. There's just a ton of different variety of cards from the 1800s. They're all really rare, but there's been a lot of different sets that came out in the 1800s. But to me, if you're going to pick one iconic card from the 1800s, it's got to be the 1888 N162 Goodwin Champions of Mike King Kelly. Along with Cap Anson, King Kelly was the superstar of the 1800s. He was often called $10,000 Kelly because his contract was for $10,000, which was a ton of money back then. And to me, this is just a gorgeous card with the sky in the background, and it's just really iconic card. You could argue that Cap Anson from this set could be considered the iconic card, but I think Mike King Kelly, looking back, people I guess look on Kelly more than they do Cap Anson, because Cap Anson was considered racist, and Kelly had a very short life, and as we'll see, I go into the 1890s. He was not included in this next set. So we go in the 1890s. To me, the key iconic card from the 1890s is the 1895 N300 Mayo's cut plug of Cap Anson. Just a simple, clean card, but I think it's just a gorgeous looking card. It's an all black. On the back is a black background. And Cap Anson is the key card in the set. Mike Kelly, I believe, had already died by then. I think he died in his mid to early 30s from pneumonia. So King Kelly wasn't even in this set, but Cap Anson was still kicking. And Cap Anson has a controversial past for possibly being the KKK, and he was a big racist, but he was a superstar in his era. He's in the 3,000 hit club, the first member of the 3,000 hit club, and this is definitely a iconic card in the 1890s. The 1900s, this one's pretty easy. It's the 1909 Tito 6 Honus Wagner. I think most of us know this card. It's probably the most iconic card in the entire hobby. It's certainly one of the most expensive cards in the hobby. It also just has a pretty interesting backstory. This is one of the first really scarce short printed cards that kids are trying to get after, because Honus Wagner was a huge star back in the day, and it was very difficult to find Honus Wagner. I think there's only like roughly 50 to 70 Honus Wagners in existence right now, and that card was pulled pretty early in the production run. It's believed that it was pulled for it could be either, there's one reason it could have gotten pulled. They think it was because maybe that Honus Wagner didn't want kids to be smoking tobacco products, and that maybe this card endorsed tobacco smoking. However, I don't know if I buy that, because he's been seen chewing tobacco in other baseball cards, and I think it was more just a contract dispute, but we don't really know. Anyway, that made this card really scarce, and it's become extremely iconic card. So hands down, the Honus Wagner from the Tito 6 set in 1909 is a 1900s iconic card. Going into 1910s, there's a lot of iconic cards in the 1910s, the Cracker Jack sets from this era, but to me it's got to be the 1960 M101 Babe Ruth rookie. He's still in the Red Sox. He's a pitcher. Just a very iconic card. You can make the argument that maybe his 1914 Baltimore News pre-rookie card could be the iconic card, but I don't think so. I think this M101 Babe Ruth card has really stood the test of time, and this is the iconic card for the 1910s. Going into the 1920s, to me there's not too many iconic cards in the 1920s. Rogers Hornsby came along during that decade, but he doesn't really have any really truly iconic cards from that time. But I have to say the iconic card from the 1920s has to be the 1925 Exhibits Lou Gehrig. It's Lou Gehrig's true rookie. This card didn't go for a lot until like a couple of years ago. It's just, this prices have really skyrocketed. I think people just kind of forget about exhibit cards. A lot of times people don't consider this exhibits to be a true baseball card. However, I think it is. I mean, they were distributed in these little vending machines, and I don't see how that's different than getting a card at the corner store, buying bubble gum or tobacco. To me, going to an area with a vending machine is kind of the same concept. You're pulling a baseball card out of it. So this card is blown up. This is a new iconic card. And Lou Gehrig, not enough can be said about Lou Gehrig. And this is his key card, and to me this is the most iconic card from the 1920s. Going into the 1930s, a ton of iconic cards in the 1930s. Of course, this is when the Goudey sets came about, from the 1933 Goudey set and the 1934 Goudey set. There's a 1939 play ball, Ted Williams rookie. A lot of key cards from this era. But to me, the most iconic card has to be the 1933 Goudey, the Goudey Lajoie card 106. Just a really interesting story behind it. Kids, when they were opening up Goudey cards in 1933, they were trying to complete their set, and this card 106 just wasn't available. No one could find it, and they kept opening more and more packs, and finally kids wrote to Goudey, demanded, like, where is this card 106? And the Goudey Card Company finally sent them card 106, which is the Goudey Lajoie. And interestingly enough, the design of the card is for the 1934 Goudey set. And there's also rumors that there's two theories on why this card is short printed. One is that Goudey might have just completely forgot about 106. However, I don't believe that. I believe in theory number two, which is it was like a marketing idea that they were trying to convince kids to buy more Goudey gum cards because they're all trying to find this card 106, and if there's this card that seems maybe available, then let's keep buying more gum cards, and I think it worked. I think it definitely created this the mystique around this missing card in the set, and kids are buying more and more cards. And these are just there weren't a lot of kids that wrote to Goudey, so these cards are very scarce. There weren't a lot distributed, and the ones that were handed out were mailed to kids, and oftentimes they're in poor condition. A lot of those cards came with like a paper clip of maybe a piece of cardboard attached to it, so they're always not in the greatest shape. But to me, this is the iconic card from the 30s. This is the only card from this list that features a player not during his playing days. But I think most would agree that this card is very, very iconic. Going into the 1940s, a lot of iconic cards in the 1940s. There's the Bowman cards came about in 1948. Yeah, the Stan Musial rookie. But to me, the most iconic card from the 40s has to be the 1949 Leaf Jackie Robinson card 49. This is just the most iconic card of Jackie Robinson. It's his rookie card, and he also has one from the Bowman set. But this is the card that everyone wants to get of Jackie Robinson, and we all know the huge impact Jackie Robinson had on baseball and civil rights, and this is a must-have card and the most iconic card from the 40s. Going into the 1950s, this is easy. It's the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card 311. One of the most iconic cards in the hobby, along with the Honus Wagner. Just a gorgeous card. Also very short printed. Has another interesting story behind it. I believe this came out towards the end of the baseball season. Baseball season might have already actually ended, and the high series baseball packs were just not selling because kids just weren't interested in baseball because baseball was already over, it was ended, and so the kids just weren't buying these high series packs, and so Topps just couldn't sell them, and they didn't know what to do with all of them, so they basically dumped a huge portion of it into, I believe, the Hudson River, which is not too far from where I live. And so it's a tough card to find, and it's also just very difficult to find centered, and it's one of the most iconic cards in the hobby, without a doubt. Going into the 1960s, this is tough because there's a lot of iconic cards in the 60s. There's the Carl Yastrzemski rookie, there's the Pete Rose rookie, but to me, the most iconic card from the 60s has to be the 1968 Topps Nolan Ryan card with Jerry Koosman in it, card number 177. This is the only card on the list that has two players on it. I don't like two-player cards, especially rookies, but this has become a definitely an iconic card in the hobby, and there's a lot of people that collect Nolan Ryan, and this has to be the iconic card of this 1960s. Going into the 1970s, to me this is pretty easy. Most iconic set, in my opinion, in the 70s is the 1975 Topps set. The most iconic card from that set is 1975 Topps George Brett. Everything about this card screams 70s. The font, the color. It's just a really cool card in my opinion. And George Brett is the key card from this set. Robin Yout's not too far behind, but this is very iconic. Right now we're into the 1980s. You could make the argument that the key card from the 80s is the 1980 Topps Rickey Henderson, a very popular card. However, I don't think you can argue that this card beats it. The 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. Star Rookie card, number 1 in the set. Every kid in the late 80s, 90s wanted this card. I knew I wanted this card. This is always like on the cover of Beckett. Just an extremely iconic card in the hobby. The photography on this inaugural Upper Deck set was just really groundbreaking for the time. And of course, Ken Griffey Jr. is or was the best player of the 90s. All right, going into the 1990s. This is a pretty easy one for me. It's got to be the 1993 SP Derek Jeter. I got to get my hands on one of these cards. Just a gorgeous card. Not too hard to find, actually. An affordable card to find if you're looking at like PSA 8 and below. PSA 9 and 10 is pretty expensive because this is a very sensitive set. But this is definitely an iconic card from the 1990s. And then going into the 2000s, the most iconic card of the 2000s, the 2001 Bowman Chrome Albert Pujols, number 340. This card is just, to me, not only is it the most iconic card from the 2000s, it's the most iconic card from the Bowman Chrome set. I mean, there's a lot of set collectors always after the first Bowman Chrome rookie autos, and this to me is the holy grail of all those cards. This really set the pace. It's only out of 500, so it's very short printed. And Albert Pujols was the best player in the 2000s. You can make the argument that maybe Miguel Cabrera was not too far behind. But this card, it's just, everything about it is just memorable. And they go for a fortune. But this is also the only card on the list that's an autograph. But you could say some other Albert Pujols cards, like the 2001 SP Authentic could be his iconic card. But to me, this is, when you think about 2000s baseball cards, this is the first card that comes to mind. Next on the list is the 2000. Next and the final one on the list from 2010s. Even though it's 2018, I think this will hold up. It's the 2010 Topps Update Mike Trout US 175. This is just a base card, but this card is really blown up in the hobby. I think a huge part of that is because of the PSA registry set. I remember like a couple years ago they put this card on the Future Hall of Famer set, and prices have really skyrocketed since then. I mean, the PSA registry has a lot of power in the card collecting community. But I think the reason why this card has really blown up too is because Mike Trout's the best player in baseball right now. Best player of the 2010s, and his 2009 Bowman Chrome rookie auto is just too expensive for most people, and this is a solid alternative. This is his first Topps card, and it's just a gorgeous card. Simple, but I think this will remain the most iconic card of the 2010s. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm curious what you guys think of the list. Who you would have included. Who would you have taken out? Yeah. Thanks for watching.